Welcome. Welcome, church members, and welcome guests to this special installation service for Reverend Robin Bartlett. We're here to confirm and celebrate a covenant between First Church and Robin that we started when we called Robin to be the minister of this church. For the church, it's a culmination of milestones that we have reached over the past few years, beginning with the conclusion of Reverend Jonathan Wright Gray's ministry to this church over 30 years, which benefited everybody in this church and the community at large. He also established the precedent of long service of a minister. You can get my meaning. Following his retirement, we had an excellent search committee who called Reverend Nancy Strickland to be the interim minister for the church while we searched for a settled minister. The Reverend Nancy Strickland went over and above and beyond what we would expect an interim minister to have performed for our church and really set us on a good track to calling our settled minister. We again assembled a terrific search committee who really went well beyond what we would have expected them to do in finding Robin. They collected the needs and wishes of the congregation, and it ended up leading to the spectacular calling of Robin, which was a unanimous vote by the congregation of this church. It's also a significant day for Robin and her family, as this is her first installation, and we're hoping that it's such a good installation service that she'll be satisfied and won't want to go through another. Anyway, so let's let the celebration begin. Following this service, we will have, the celebration will continue with a reception and in the parish hall, which for those who don't know, is down in this direction. As long as you go all the way to the end of the building here, you will find the parish hall. Thank you.
In the Spirit of Jesus, we unite for the worship of God and the service of humankind.
Please join with me in the call to worship that you will find in your bulletin. Each of us was called to do God's work of love in the world, to take up the ministry in the Spirit of Jesus for our time and our place. We are equipped by God as saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, and for serving a broken world. We come to bring glory to God and to celebrate God's gracious gifts to all of us. In your spirit,
presence of the holy, both for our time together this afternoon and for Robin's life and ministry ahead in this beautiful space with this beautiful congregation. Let us pray. Spirit of life, you are welcome here in this place among all of us friends and colleagues, believers and skeptics, family and church family. We ask you to be present to us now and for the work to come. We invoke you as our pagan ancestors once did, beholden to the mystery of the ground beneath our feet and the wonder of the air in our lungs as we praise you. We invoke you as our Puritan ancestors once did, full of wordiness and proper pomp, garbed in finery and robes aplenty, and shiny with promise. We invoke you as our Reformed ancestors once did, angry at the church's failings and ready to reform ourselves to your ingrained image, O God. We invoke you as our united and uniting church ancestors once did, hopeful that Jesus' call for all to be one might be lived out in tangible ways through congregations unified in love for one another and for you. We invoke you as our ancestors striving for civil rights once did and still do, helping to move the arc of history toward your promise of justice in whatever incremental ways we can. And we invoke you as the ancestors who formed the first church of Sterling once did, knowing that 4 walls and 2 denominations can never fully express the wideness of your truth. And we invoke you as the congregation gathered today, witnesses to Robin's installation into the life and ministry of this church. Oh God, surround Robin and all of us with your presence. Inhabit all of our hopeful hearts so that we would take the power and promise of this moment with us as we serve your good world. Amen.
We are Femami, and basically all of us, we're sort of Robin's aunties. Because we've known her at least since she was 12 years old, and we don't really totally give her up to you, but we're willing to share her. She asked that we do this song today, and it's called This is the Light. It's a call and response song, so you don't get to sit there and stare at us. You get to sing part of it with us. And we will teach you the part you're going to sing, and then you are going to do a call and response in which you will call the days of the week, starting Monday, and then one of the fem aunties or her mom will respond back with the appropriate part for the day of the week. So it goes like this, and as soon as you know it, just sing with it. It goes, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I knew I could count on you right from the start. So the way the days of the week are going to go is you all are going to say, on Monday, you'll say something, and then you say on Tuesday, on Wednesday, remember this part, on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday, on Sunday, let my little light shine, let my little light shine. Go, this little light shine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light shine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light shine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Hear the words of Psalm 133. How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. It's so good, it's like precious oil that's poured on the head, running down the beard, running down Aaron's beard, down his collar, onto his robe. It is as if the dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion. For there God bestows God's blessing, even life evermore.
Our second reading is Sainthood by Louis Jenkins. Because of my extraordinary correctness and sensitivity to late, I have been elevated to the status of temporary minor saint, secular. The position comes with a commendation praising my uncharacteristic reticence tantamount to sagacity. This means that my entire being is now suffused with a pale radiance, somewhat like the light of a small fluorescent bulb. The light in a kitchen range, perhaps, only not quite so bright. And that instead of walking, I now float. At an altitude of about 3 inches above the ground. I move about at a slow and stately speed as befits my rank. I move to the left or to the right by inclining my head and upper body in the appropriate direction. It's a less than perfect condition. The light keeps my wife up at night, and though the added height is beneficial, moving about in a crowd presents difficulties. My forward speed seems to be fixed and, though slow, is quite tricky to stop. I lean back, but my momentum carries me forward like a boat. Suddenly, turning my head can send me veering into the person next to me or into a wall. In order to remain in one place, I found it necessary to attach cords to my belt on one end and to various solid objects around the room on the other. These days, I take my meals standing up, tethered like the Hindenburg. Thank you, Chad and Kelly, for those readings. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts find their place in the heart of God today. Behold, how very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. For there the Lord ordained his blessing, life forevermore. Psalm 133 is a song of ascent, and it does appear that you are ascending today. In fact, Robin, given all this grand celebration, it appears that you have been elevated to the status of temporary minor saint
religious. As I look closer, it appears that your entire being is now suffused with a pale radiance, perhaps like the light of a small chalice. Let it shine. You aren't floating, though. It seems as though you are tethered quite firmly to the ground. Those feet of clay are heavy, aren't they? Ministry, a less than perfect condition. 1 year ago, Robin was ordained as a Unitarian Universalist minister, and what a celebration it was. I wasn't there, but I read about it in People magazine. They don't cover those these days? On that day, you promised to walk with God, to serve God, and to love God. The ordination is a wedding, a naming, a knighting, a lifting, and a setting aside. We gather on this first anniversary of your marriage to God for a service that looks quite similar, but glows with a different light at its heart. Instead of being called to the ministry, you are called to this ministry. Called to walk with them, serve them, and love them. If the ordination is a song of ascent, while the installation is a song of gravity, where once, Robin, you were lifted up and set apart, now we carry you back down and set you amongst a people. Today we tether you to these people, not with cords attached to your belt to various solid objects around the room, but tethered with promises. You will be asked by your people, will you live and serve, learn and love, and walk humbly with our God and with us? Behold, how very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. First Church in Sterling. I read your very well-written history on your website, and I still don't know the right language to describe you. Non-denominational? No. Post-denominational? Maybe not yet. Interdenominational? Trans-denominational? Poly-denominational? Starting to get a little risque. I'll stop. I currently serve Fallen Community Church, which was also born of a merger, but it was just the Unitarians and the Universalists getting together in the late 1800s, a century before the national merger in 1961. Before my church was named after the first minister, Charles Fallen, we called ourselves the Church of the Redeemer. Yes, that's right. We went from redeemed to fallen. Our softball team is called the Fallen Angels. But before my call to Fallen, I had 7 years as the associate minister at First Parish in Lincoln, a congregation very similar to this one, about the same number of members, and a dual membership in the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ. Back in the 1700s, First Parish in Lincoln was originally planted as the second congregation in Concord, before Lincoln was a town, just as you were planted as the second parish of Lancaster, before Sterling was a town. And in the 1800s, members of the Lincoln congregation and this congregation became intrigued by this new Unitarian theology that everyone was talking about. How about those days? When everyone was talking about that new, exciting theology. I can just imagine the headline in the October 1820 edition of People magazine. William Ellery Channing, his life, his loves, his controversial new theology. This exciting theology was inspiring enough that each church had a significant body break off and build a new church
a stone's throw away, where they could practice their religion in peace. In Lincoln, the new Unitarian sanctuary was built 100 yards or so down the hill, just enough lower to avoid being hit by lightning constantly, the way the original Congregational church building was. And still is. Don't read anything into that. Come on. Here in Sterling, this religious revolution was so pronounced that the people of this town built not just one, but 2 churches across the green. Close enough, I can see here, for the preacher to stand in the pulpit and shoot the stink eye right out the back door. You know they thought about that. How very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. Well, soon after the church in Lincoln split, historical records tell this story. There was a prominent lady of the town who was vocally opposed to the new Unitarian church. And one Sunday after service at her church, she was getting into her horse-drawn carriage, and then to everyone's alarm, the horse took off running before she was able to take the reins. But when the runaway horse reached the Unitarian church, he slowed down, turned, and came up to the door. The Unitarian minister caught up the horse's reins, handed them to his flustered neighbor, and said, "Well, Mrs. Farrer, who would have thought that you would turn in here to be saved?" And yet, 100 years after Mrs. Farrer's wild ride, the Lincoln churches reunited in 1942. And this congregation, the Sterling churches, fully reunited as well in 1949. We had a saying in Lincoln, "I'll sing your hymn and you'll sing mine." There is room for all of us and all of who we are. Behold how very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. Or, as your motto puts it, I got this off your website, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity. There are differences in how you and First Parish in Lincoln went about unity. In Lincoln, they unified, and in Sterling, you federated. So in Lincoln, everyone who joins the church simply joins the church. They're not asked to declare a denomination. Governance, finance, everything has been merged. Here, my understanding is that you do ask people to choose an identity. I understand that more than half have chosen at this point interdenominational, and the rest can choose one of the other 3 options, 2 options. We lost one there. So from what your website says, that means you have 4, is it 3 now, church societies under this roof. And then each of these 3 church societies has its own officers and representatives and its own annual meeting every year. Liberty requires a lot of meetings. Liberty is a less than perfect condition. The unified nature of the Lincoln Church streamlined governance and finance, and it allowed for rich theological expression in worship. The congregation was and is deeply religious in all the best ways. Prayerful, thoughtful, open-minded. It's good church. And yet, the shadow side of the way that Lincoln unified, in my experience, was that the congregation had tried to please members of both denominations by essentially discarding the identity and symbols of each. And 60 years later, that decision had hardened into glass. The sanctuary has no crosses and no chalices. I remember more than one elder telling me in hushed tones over lunch, "I'm a Unitarian, but I don't talk about that in church." Or You can tell what I believe by what side of the sanctuary that I sit on. That's true. And I was scolded for volunteering for denominational work or attending denominational events because in some people's minds, using my professional hours to support the faith that had raised me, ordained me, and built the very sanctuary in which we worshiped every Sunday morning was not only a waste of time, but possibly an unethical use of my time, because we don't talk about denominations here. Behold how very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. Unity is a less than perfect condition. The psalmist describes unity is like the precious oil on the head running down the beard of Aaron, running down over the collar of his robes. Similes for what constitutes good and pleasant have really changed in the last few millennia. I definitely want to avoid having that much olive oil poured over my head. The dry cleaning bill alone would be horrifying. Then the psalmist gives another simile. Unity is like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. And the odd thing about that simile is that Hermon is really far away from the mountains of Zion. Dew rising from one place and falling really far away in another place, that's really unpredictable. And it's not really very fair, too. Why does Zion get the dew that Hermon cooked up? Unity is not the same thing as equity. Unity is messy, unpredictable, rare, disordered. Is it worth it? How very good and pleasant is it when kindred live together in unity? Is a marriage of liberty and unity possible? Can we have room for the chalice and the cross? How can our congregations and denominations seek unity, a unity that embraces the messiness and unpredictability of individual expression? How can our congregations and denominations seek liberty, a liberty that is the freedom of the soul, not the freedom to get everything you want? Must uniqueness be a terminal condition? What is God's will for her beloved children? Now, this church has 3 denominations: interdenominational, UU, and United Church of Christ. That's a lot. But think of the Christians who worship at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Many people believe that that church was built on the very spot where Jesus was entombed and rose again. The place is so sacred that within one church building, there are 6 Christian traditions worshiping: Greek Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox, Syrian Orthodox, Armenian Apostolic, Roman Catholic, and Egyptian Coptic. The Armenian Apostolic priests have ownership of a small worship space within the large church, but the Greek Orthodox own the ceiling of that room. It is hard to imagine how that got worked out. The story goes that recently the light bulb burned out on the ceiling of the small Armenian chapel, and unless the Armenians wanted to worship in the dark, somebody had to change that bulb. However, it was difficult to get to the bulb to change it because the Greek Orthodox wouldn't let the Armenians touch their space, the ceiling where the bulb was, and the Armenians wouldn't let the Greek Orthodox touch their space, which included the floor. In the version I heard from a tour guide, leaders from both denominations were on the phone with the Israeli police arguing they should have the right to change the bulb. So the very next day, the chief of police went down to the church very early in the morning, just casually carrying a ladder. And he strolled nonchalantly into the room with the burnt-out light bulb, replaced it quickly, and went back to his office. And then he called the leaders and said, "I was just there. The light bulb seemed to be working fine." Where are we pushing a door shut and worshiping in the dark? Amen. Where are we allowing our cries of liberty to imprison us? Where are we laying sole claim to something that could be so easily shared? How many Christians does it take to change a light bulb? There is another section of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that has been fought over by the Egyptian Coptic Church and the Ethiopian Orthodox for centuries. It is this little bit of flat roof, no shade, hardly any shade, baking in the Middle Eastern sun, and currently the Ethiopians control this space. However, in protest, the Coptics have a monk stationed in a folding chair on the roof every day, all day long, to express their claims. One hot day, about a dozen years ago, the Coptic monk in the chair moved from the agreed-upon spot to a place a few feet away in the shade. This was interpreted as a hostile move, leading to elderly monks throwing furniture and punches over the crossing of an invisible line on a roof. Behold, oh, behold, how we fight over the roof while the whole foundation crumbles, how we hoard our history while losing our mission, how we draw lines invisible and hard as glass to protect ourselves and end up in a jail of our own making. Church, a less than perfect creation, filled with less than perfect people. Behold, God is calling us, my kindred, to unity. God is promising us that it is good, very good. Behold, it is even pleasant. I do believe, yea, I do prophesy, that the Unitarian Universalist and United Church of Christ denominations will follow in the footsteps of churches like this, and like the church in Lincoln, and reunite. And it will be less than perfect, and messy, and unpredictable, and deeply complex. But isn't that always the way that true unity really is? And it will require many thousands of hours of committee meetings. And isn't that the way liberty always goes? Towards a merger, our forward speed seems to be fixed, and though slow, is quite tricky to stop. We lean back, but momentum carries us forward like a boat. I am not sure what a merger of the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ would look like, but I pray to God that we will not just mash our names together. And I say that as somebody that has had a hyphenated last name since birth. I can't imagine that we would lose the uni at the beginning of all three, and we all did come out of the Free Church tradition, so maybe our name would become the United Free Church. It's a suggestion. I know that many of my Unitarian Universalist brothers and sisters are terrified that a merger would mean that the larger denomination of the United Church of Christ would swallow us alive and we would never be heard from again. People said the same thing during the 1961 merger, when the larger and richer Unitarians swallowed the remnants of the Universalist Church, and the historical lesson that I think prevails there is, you are what you eat. And maybe out beyond the 7 principles and beyond the Apostles' Creed, we will find a new promise, a promise that we will hold above the variations of belief and above the vicissitudes of politics, a promise that we are a people of faith who value love above all else, in essentials unity, in non-essentials liberty, in all things charity. A song of reunion. Behold how very good and pleasant it shall be. Robin, don't be a temporary minor saint. Congregation, do not be a temporary minor church. Shake off the old tethers that hold you down and only accept the sacred tethers that hold you to each other and to God. Live out your calling. You are already suffused with a great radiance. Uncover your light and let it shine. Behold how good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity, for there the Lord ordained his blessing, life forevermore. Amen.
Will the members of First Church in Sterling please rise in body or in spirit and join in our words of installation printed in your bulletins? We gather together in the strength and solidarity of our congregation. We cherish our congregation for its historical achievements, for those who founded and nurtured it, and for those who again and again have faithfully transformed it when our mission was called to do so. We celebrate this congregation's call to gather in the Spirit of Jesus and work toward the creation of heaven on earth. We celebrate this congregation's call to joyfully embrace the diverse community of belief, create a sanctuary for growth and wholeness, and unite to bend the arc of justice to earth. This is our religious home, one in which we entrust our spirits. We seek a minister to lead and serve us. We seek one who will journey with us, teaching and upholding our Christian values and traditions. We seek a minister who will share our concerns and stand with us in love and faith, through joy and sorrow. We seek one who will lead with a prophetic voice, an ear for our own soul's yearnings, and a call to share our message with the world. We are ready to install such a minister. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the authority and privilege of calling ministers rests solely with the congregation. Since Reverend Robin Bartlett is a Unitarian Universalist minister, we install her within that tradition today. After an extensive search process and a long period of discernment from this congregation and from you, we voted to call you as our minister in May. Since then, you have moved to this community, to the church's parsonage, and have begun serving this church in worship and pastoral care, representing us in the community and administering this organization. Pastor Robin, we have already recognized your calling to the ministry within the members of the First Parish, with the first members of the First Parish in Milton, Boston University School of Theology, First Parish in Brookline, First Parish in Lexington, and the First Parish in Sherburne, Massachusetts. You have grown in your calling to this point. You have spent long years preparing for ministry, for this time and place. Now, on this day, we install you as our minister, to live and serve, to learn and love, and to walk humbly with our God and with us. Pastor Robin, are you ready and willing to undertake this commitment to this ministry?
I am.
We, the members of First Church, do hereby install you, Reverend Robin Bartlett, as the settled minister of the First Church in Sterling, Massachusetts. We receive you as our pastor and teacher, promising to labor with you in the ministry of this gospel, and to give you due honor and support. We would have you speak the truth of the gospel in freedom and love, to minister unto all people in their joys and their sorrows, to celebrate the many blessings of our lives together with awe and joy, to serve God with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all your heart, to practice forgiveness with us and love us, and to invite our people into lives transformed by service and shaped by the pursuit of justice. I invite all those gathered here to rise in body or in spirit and join the members of First Church in Sterling in affirming this installation. Together, we, the gathered congregation of friends and colleagues, recognize and affirm you as the minister of this church. We rejoice with you on this occasion and offer you our continuing prayers, friendship, and support. May your ministry be blessed to you and all those whom you serve.
With profound gratitude for the many who have come before me, trusting in the strength, grace, and guidance of God, who has called me forth from among us, and with your continuing support, I joyfully take up the ministry which you have called me. You may be seated.
Robin, we had the privilege of representing the congregation in finding you. Now again, we stand for all in giving to you this stole, which is to recognize the commitment that we have just made to each other. It was made by Robin Harper of many colors, many designs that reflect our diversity, but sewn into one flowing pattern to symbolize our unity. It may be messy. When you wear this stole, we hope you will be touched by the love that we have for you. And our Eastern brothers and sisters know well that being quiet helps to connect us with God. Please use this singing bowl to call us, and maybe yourself, into quiet, and then to bring us back to the world that we serve. And finally, the small tree of life will remind you of the interconnectedness of all of God's creation.
Beloved, the laying on of hands is an ancient practice that confers an owning and a passing of authority. It is more ancient than we know. In addition, the coming close to touch the one who will be your leader, but to touch each other. It's an opportunity for you to share love and energy, to feel it through your hands into Robin, and to feel it pass back to you, so that you may always be connected, even when times are hard and even when times are joyous. You will remember this time that you have come close to touch Robin. In addition, when Robin wonders what she's doing here, she will remember that you came all the way down the aisle to touch her, or to touch one who was touching her, that you have given yourselves to her. And she will know that she has given herself to you. And so, beloved, now to enact this ancient rite, Robin, I ask you to come here. And I ask Robin's family and friends to come close first, and then another ring of clergy, and then the members of the congregation. Beloved, come as close as you can. Don't worry about touching each other. But put your hand on another so that we may pray and blessing over her. Please, will you come? And clergy, come. And congregation, come. We need not hurry. Now, is everyone connected? And now we pray with you. Holy One of blessing, we beg your presence as we pray. We ask your blessing, O God, on this congregation, the good people of First Church Sterling, and on their able pastor, Robin Bartlett. Teach them all the ways of compassion for one another and for the world. Unite them in the practices of prayer and acts of discernment. Prepare them for learning how you will move in them to make the world whole. Make them thirsty for justice. Give them courage to know and name their own needs so that they may be equipped to meet the needs of others with authentic recognition. Make them resilient to meet the hard times and make them joyful in all times. Let the gratitude for their lives together rise in their hearts and rise on their lips. Connect this congregation to the wider world, the northeastern region of the Unitarian Universalist Association and the Central Association of the Massachusetts Conference of the United Church of Christ, and the neighboring congregations, so that they may not be alone, nor may they hoard their gifts for themselves. Oh God, I pray for the possibility of this congregation's enlightenment on behalf of us all, and enlightenment on behalf of the universe. I pray that in everything they do, their banner will be love, and Jesus their guide. I pray all of this now for love's sake. And the people said resiliently and loudly, Amen. You may stay for a minute. We pray you'll be our eyes and watch us where we go, and teach us to be wise in times when we say amen? Amen. The congregation be wild with applause.
Robin. The children of the First Church, many of whom are here today, are very excited to have you as our new pastor. We asked the kids to think about what a pastor should do beyond being the person who stands up here on Sunday morning wearing the fancy outfit. I thought this might be difficult for them because we have Sunday school at the same time that you're in here leading worship with the rest of the congregation, and you don't have a chance to hang out with us. But that was not true. They are very aware of your presence here with us, and their arms are open to welcome you and embrace you. We talked in particular about what they would like you to do with them in Sunday school, in fellowship, and in their everyday lives. The children believe that their relationship with you is really special and important. Each class made a list of ideas of things they would like you to do and what they want to do with you, and I have collected them here for you. Pastor Robin, please play with us. Come to Family Fun Night and play with us. Please sing with us. We like to sing. Please pray with us. Include us in worship. Do some crafts with us. Help us with care packages for children. Be involved in the Christmas pageant and help us put on our Christmas pageant costumes. Learn our names. We will introduce ourselves to you by sending you cards that tell you who we are. Tell us some things about you. What do you like to do? What's your favorite food? Do you like broccoli? We will make crosses and write messages on them for you, and you should write messages on them and send them back to us. Tell us stories. We like Myrtle the Turtle, but would enjoy it if you have other characters you can tell stories about as well. Be available to us when we need to talk to you, when we are sick, or when we're having a hard time. Teach us about God. Answer our questions so we can learn and understand. Continue being interactive with everyone. Help us with service and mission projects. Spend time with us and participate in activities with us. Mostly, the children and the young people of this congregation are excited to have you here with them and are looking forward to having fun with you as they learn about God and as they grow up in this church family. They are ready to get to know you and really want you to get to know them. Thank you.
It is such a joy to be among you, good people of First Church in Sterling. I'm pleased to bring you greetings from more than 300 congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Clare Barton, Massachusetts Bay, and Baloo Channing districts. Your siblings in spirit and celebration on this great day. It's a strange custom that we have at installations for a minister from afar to come before a congregation heady with the delight of a new pastorate, having never met you before, to tell you what to do. It is indeed great to meet you at last, having heard many wonderful things about about you from Pastor Robin, and we all know that she is prone to understatement. So her stories were beginning to stretch my imagination for what a perfect New England town church could look like. Since most of my own experience with bucolic town life comes from television, I was picturing a little bit of Mayberry, with many of you looking like the cast of The Waltons, and just to spice it up, a few of the characters from Northern Exposure. I wish my generational kids I would arrive here on this October afternoon to vibrant autumn hues, apple-cheeked children, a congregation that was nice, but not so nice as to draw suspicion. Neighborly, decent, devoted to God and country. Good and pleasant and gathered together in blessed assurance of life forevermore. So knowing you as well as I do, I wondered today, in charging you, whether it might be best to do so with a credit card. And then I thought better of it, understanding that my credit limit could never be so high as to absorb the value of this community. So maybe a patch of a red flag, something toward which you might charge. And then I realized you're both too civilized and too smart to fall for that. So perhaps a set of jumper cables. But if Robin can be trusted, your voltage would exceed what any of those wires could handle. So I'm left with words. I know how lovable Robin is firsthand. I also know how loving she is. So it's hard for me to imagine that you need to be told how to take care of her. She will draw your goodwill from depths you didn't know existed, and you will nurture her in the subtleties of ministry among you as she gains confidence in her skills, and you all settle into each other's peculiarities. That is what ministers and congregations do. It's a process that's as satisfying as it is inevitable. I know you've already begun that journey, and I wish you every blessing for it, because it is truly a blessed journey. But a charge, that's a different story, friends. A charge is a task, a job description, a purpose, something to send a current through you that will send a jolt into the world and let it know you are here. I know you come here every week and you are brought to life by gathering in worship together, by singing stately hymns and irreverent ballads, by hearing the good word preached by this fine pastor, by greeting your neighbors and healing and hearing their prayers. You take care of each other, body and soul, know the depths of each other's lives, and hold the breadth of your own yearnings for wholeness. It is a staggeringly beautiful thing, the life of a church at the town center. The pulse of the community flowing through you with all the breadth of human living captured in these walls. This is an extraordinary place with extraordinary power that could be lost in the humble, ordinary way you carry on. But there is a subversive power at work among you. Have you felt it? Yeah. The power to meet the fear that is pervading our culture with the truth of this simple, neighborly gathering. A testament of love's power to gather us up, knit us together, give us a life deeper and richer than we ever knew possible. The world has always needed this witness. The testament to the truth of connection when fear is around every corner. The song of hope when despair sends out its tendrils of defeat. The proclamation of our birthright that places us deep in the embrace of a God of infinite love and abiding mercy. Now, my friends, your charge is to take up spreading this good news like it's your job. Your only job. Because it is. Every time a book is opened, every time the bread is broken, every time the cup is poured out, every time a towel is wrapped around the beggar's feet. Every time you open your doors for those in need in this town or around the globe. Every time you tell someone of the loving God at work in your life, in your community, in your heart, there's a chance for a new story to unfold, a fresh wind of spirit to be realized, a new resistance to the powers of empire that keep us fearful, domesticated, consumed with order, anxious. Your congregation has been on the cutting edge of privileging neighborhood, neighborliness, over the lure of all other allegiances. Your character of representing so many theological strands and ways of being church invites you to consider the gifts of those affiliations, their histories, what wisdom and gifts your differences offer to your shared task of building a church that will lead us all into a new day. Why else would we keep any denominational or associational identity at all, if not for its good gifts and the hard work of the forebears who paved the way? The Spirit of the living God asks of us to simply magnify it, sing its praises in our life, and bring it to those in need. Those wise people who brought you together put first the call to live passionately the truth of our connection, our neighborhood, the state of belonging to one another by our proximity and building our understanding until our neighborhood extends to the far reaches of the earth through compassion rather than dominion. You are doing revolutionary work. You are doing the work of building the kingdom. You are acting as agents of God's love in a world aching for mercy, for justice, and most of all, for hope. While that engine is revving strong inside these walls, hook up those cables. Tether yourselves to a place where the engine chokes and the ignition is not turning over. Lend your spark. Dare to make a connection. And instead of driving away after that brief jolt and an engine humming to life again, make that stranger kin. Whether it's a person, another congregation, a community in need, nearby or far away. And then do it again and again. Feel yourselves transformed by what you learn. Feel your minds renewed by the power of your faith, and your faith so may it be. So are you charged. Amen. Amen.
You all reasonably comfortable? We're almost done. I'm going to talk. The Reverend Purse is going to ask you for money. Then we're going to sing a little bit. It's going to be a handshake. So if you want, just right now, just take a moment, stand up and stretch. I so understand. I'm going to move this stool. Now, Robin, and I should tell you, normally what you do in charge to the minister is stare at them like this. But that's really freaky. So I'm going to talk, and I'll look at you from time to time, and if I'm looking out here, I know you're not Robin. Okay, we've met. Robin, I don't want to talk too long today, although I may already have. It's been a long day for you and for many of us, and I know that pretty much each and every person here would like to give you their own charge at some point, probably very soon. So there isn't any reason to go long
or to get fancy. Now, I assume that people have already told you the usual stuff, or they will when we are done here. Robin, you are, of course, a much kinder person than I am, and you've attended many more installations. I come from a long line of clergy curmudgeons, and I serve a curmudgeonly church. But those sorts of things are things like, don't forget your family in the rush to do a good job. And don't forget your job in the midst of all the other things that a minister's spouse and parent must do. Take care of yourself. Keep in touch with your support network. And pray, Robin, because I know that works for you. Communicate with your colleagues enough so that they are a support to you, but not so much as they drive you crazy. Robin, be present to the people and things you love, your family, your blessed congregation, and, of course, to God. And remember your covenant, the one you affirm on Sunday morning, and the same one that I affirm at the Elliott Church in Natick, Massachusetts, UCC, UUA. In the love of truth and in the spirit of Jesus, we unite for the worship of God and the service of all. I know that's not quite the same because we're liberals. And we like to change things, and sometimes we change things in different ways. But no matter how you decide to say it, it is powerful stuff. The church, God, and Jesus have called you, and they want your own Robin Bartlett take on the faith that we try to live in a challenging world. Now, if I missed any of the usual charged stuff, I am sure someone else will let you know, particularly the ministers. We're like that. But I want now to take just a couple of minutes and focus on the core of your belief. I know that you serve a church that is theologically similar to mine. And at times, you, like the members of your congregation, find yourself pulled in different directions. Now, the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ are not that far away from each other in many respects. Yesterday, at a UCC event, one of our colleagues, who is not here today, described the UCC as being the last house on the far left end of the street called Christianity. The last house. And the UUA as being right around, presumably, a left-hand turn. But with an adjoining yard. But Robin, anyone who has had neighbors and who hasn't can understand the fact that the differences between neighbors are felt all the more strongly because of their proximity. So I want you to remember something. I want you to remember, Robin, that you possess an orthodoxy. An orthodoxy. And you are here to embody it and to preach it. Even though every single Sunday, most likely, it is someone else's heresy. Now I direct you to the words of one of the great curmudgeons of the Church Universal, G.K. Chesterton. And he does use some of those pronouns. I thought about expunging them, but I realized, A, he talked a long time ago, and B, he's just enough of a curmudgeon to come back and smite us. In former days, he writes, the heretic was proud of not being a heretic. It was the kingdom of the world and the police and the judges who were heretics. He was orthodox. He had no pride in having rebelled against them because they had rebelled against him. Robin, do not shrink from your beliefs. Do not compromise or equivocate or lie. Do not go along to get along. When it comes to this, your deepest and most profoundly held understanding of the depth and nature of the divine. That said, Robin, you are kinder than I am. So I want you to embody your personal orthodoxy in a spirit of respect for the personal orthodoxies of others. We serve in diverse contexts these days, and that diversity is our strength. It is the hallmark of the liberal church, in fact, to be open to all who seek us and to affirm their basic humanity in the midst of the mess that we all bring. Now, Paul, for you Unitarians in the Bible, the Apostle Paul tells us that all things work together for good to those who love God. All things work together for good to those who love God. The most important element here is love. And we do not need to believe the same things to give the love of God and to God and for God the place of honor in our hearts. So, Robin, there you go. Your charge. It is my profound prayer and hope that thanks to the gifts that you bring to this ministry in Sterling, you won't have to need to be charged in this context, that of installation, for a long, long time. Amen. Amen.
I would like to thank Brother Tierney Elliott for leaving me a little time left. I bring you the warm fraternal greetings of the First Parish Church in Milton. Those people there were very, very excited. I want to say they're wicked excited, but it's Milton, so they're just very excited. A few months ago, Robin called me up and said, "Hank, would you come and be the marshal at my installation?" I love being a marshal. I love bossing clergy around. You know that. Yes, I will be the marshal. She said, "Oh, that's great. Oh, and can you do the offering words as well?" I said, "Sure, no problem. I'll do the offering words. That's great." And then I hung the phone, and a few minutes later, the phone rang again. "Hello? It's Robin again. I've been thinking. Maybe you're not the right person to do the offering." She got a little nervous. She knows that she's nervous now. Yeah, you are nervous now. She got a little worried. I tend to run on. I tend to speak plainly, bring up things that people don't want to talk about. I'm not going to talk about any seminaries. I'm not talking about that, right? I'm not going to talk about, well, no, I'm not going to talk about the stole thing. Making us all wear certain clothes you want us to wear. When did you tell me what to wear? They should say, "Hank, no, you're going to come in there, Hank, you're going to come in there with your fancy city slicker language and jokes, and my people, they're good people, Hank. They live out in Sterling, they live close to Route 2, Hank. It's apple country, Hank." You should have heard what things you said about the guy. There's not one man in the choir who can grow a mustache. Okay, there's one, all right. She said to me, "Hank, all of your humor that goes over everyone's head." But I know the truth. You weren't worried about my humor and jokes going over people's heads. You were worried that my joke and humor would go a little bit lower. Lower. That's what you were. You were worried that I was going to talk about something lower of the body. gonna, that's good. I planned to see how long I could make Robin squirm until I came to this very moment right here. When I talked about what's in our wallets. Big sigh of relief goes at Robin. Many years ago, when I started going to church, you know, after just growing up as a, you know, going to church, you went to church and it was great, and then you became an adult and you went to church. You're like, I'm an adult now. I'm going to go on Sunday morning. I'm going to drink coffee. And I went there and it's fine. And then you remember, oh my gosh, they're passing a plate. I've got no money. Or I've got little money. And I've got a little money, but I got a date later on. I can't give too much to the church, but it's all right. God understands. And you pass it on. I was Unitarian Universalist, so it was like, whatever, understands. And the plate would go around. But then I realized, at a certain point, I realized that I needed to open my wallet and take out all the money I had and put it in the plate. And when I did that, that's when I knew I really believed. I realized I could not let God into my heart until I let God into my wallet. This is the time, my friends, for you to show. We've heard a lot about God. We Unitarians have taken a little bumping this morning, even though we say, most of us Unitarians who are here, we're kind of Christian Unitarians, and you guys are making jokes at our expense. I'm hurt. I'm asking the rest of you then to show us how much God you have in your heart by opening your wallets, taking out all of the cash you have, taking out your checkbooks if you still have checkbooks, writing out a check to the Living Tradition Fund. This is a fund that goes to support the ministry of Unitarian Universalist ministers, seminarians, retired ministers. It is a wonderful fund. And I'm going to ask the ushers to come forward and to make sure that you take a collection, not only from people in the back, but also of the clergy in front as well. The offering will not be given and received. Amen.
It does. Oh, so it's a lot. Robin, would you please join me? This is a very exciting moment for me to be standing here after an absence of 3.5 years. And it's a profound honor and a deep pleasure to do, Robin, what you have asked me to do. I have a unique role in this service. I'm the only one who can do it. A lot of reasons for that. Actually, I needed to say I'm the last Baptist standing. One of my parting gifts to this congregation was to shepherd them through the process of the disbanding of the Baptist Society. We used to be more complicated than we are. It just was a matter of dwindling numbers. But I'm here, standing. But Robin, you have asked me to offer the right hand of fellowship. And the more I thought about this, the more I realized it had to be more than just me to you. It had to symbolize and connect at a deeper level. And the more I thought about that, I remembered this picture that has been dusting away up in the church balcony. It's a picture of the Reverend Everett Kent. The Reverend Everett Kent was born in 1843, just 1 year after this meeting house was built. He was born in Benson, Vermont. His father, Cephas, was a congregational pastor in Benson. And he grew up in Vermont. He went to Middlebury College. And just before he was ready to graduate, he was called into the militia, the volunteers of Vermont in the Civil War, 1864. Almost ready to graduate from college. He was wounded in battle. His right wrist was shattered by a mini ball. He stayed in the service for another year until 1865. The war ended, of course, and he went back to Middlebury. And he finished his college. He then went to Andover Seminary, following in his father's footsteps. 1869, he graduated. And guess where he went? Sterling, Massachusetts. Of course, where else would anybody want to go? He served here for just 2 years as what was then called a supply pastor. And he had a missionary itch in him, apparently. And he then went to Michigan, Indiana. And while he was there for, I think, about 9 years, he married a girl from Alstead, New Hampshire. They had their 3 children. And if he wasn't already a missionary, then he went to Atlanta, Georgia. I presume with the help of the Congregational Home Missionary Society. And he was the founding pastor down there of the Central Congregational Church of Atlanta. You know that church? Anybody knows that church? It's one of the leading UCC congregations in the Southeast today. He stayed there for 9 years, and then, if he still wasn't sure if he was a missionary, he went to Iowa. And he pastored 3 different churches in Iowa over the space of 16 years. One of them was a little church that was getting support from the Home Missionary Society. He said, "We don't need your money anymore, denomination, we can do this on our own." And he stayed there, and he just was this tremendous pastor building up churches. By then, at the end of that time, he was 62 years old, and he came back home. He came to pastor the church in the little village of Enosburg, Vermont, which was actually where he was born. And after a few years, he pastored the same church that his father had pastored in Benson, Vermont. And by now, he was 69 years old. Guess where he went after that? Sterling, Massachusetts. He came back to Sterling, full circle at the end of his ministerial career. And he came here in 1912, served here from 1912 to 1914, when he retired. Now, in that church in Sterling, it wasn't this church, it was the one right across the street, the Federated Church. No, it wasn't. It was the Congregational Church, to keep it straight. And he came here in 1912 to 1914. And in that congregation, in those years, there was a little girl, 13 years old, by the name of Florence Wiley. How many of you remember Florence Wilder? I want to see some hands. There's still some of us left, okay? Florence Wilder was the organist of this congregation until she retired at age 84. You got a long way to go, girl. And I don't know if she was organist yet, but Charlotte Patton Gildudas' mother was the organist at that church over there. Maybe at the same time, I'm not sure. But anyway, he ended his ministry in 1914, which was the year that the Baptists and the Congregationalists over there federated and became one single congregation, which is perhaps why he ended his career at that point and let some new leadership be chosen by this joint congregation. He stayed living in the town of Sterling for the last 10 years of his life as pastor emeritus. He died of old age in Worcester City Hospital. Now, that's about as far back as I can reach, okay, with any sense of knowledge about it. And, you know, who was this man anyway? Those are just the bare bones of his life. But somebody wrote a little biography of him. This is what they said. They said, what manner of man is this? They said, he is a chunk, but not a chunk. Well, he is a little bit chunky in this picture, as you can see. But if you look at it, you can imagine if he had white whiskers, it says, he would be in appearance your traditional Santa Claus. He had all the breeze and jingle and twinkle and jollity of the good Saint Nick. He is as quick as a flash in speech and movement. If he ever had a sorrow, he could not show it. If he ever had an enemy, he treated him as a best friend. If he had a song or a smile, he gave it out to the world. His preaching was always good news. A little inflated, maybe, but you know, we don't mind. A little bit inflation. But even that, you know, does it get to the heart of this man, Everett Kent? Well, there's one more thing I have to tell you. Florence Wilder told me about him. I think she knew that we had this picture up there in the balcony somewhere. And she said, one night she said, Jonathan, you know, I remember this man. And you know what I remember about him? She said to me, I remember that when he was standing up in the pulpit, that pulpit over there across the street, when he was standing in the pulpit, there was a glow about him. And she told me this as though this was something really important to know. You know? Really important to know. And I remember that to this day. And so, Robin, the connection that I offer you today with a simple handshake is not just a connection of externals. It's not just a connection of, you know, build up this organization, this institution of First Church in Sterling, you know, raise a good budget, keep it going. It's something inward. It's something that brings a glow. And that's the connection we need. And I'm sure it's not just Everett Kent, it's many others that he symbolizes. But I am so happy to be able to tether you to this place and this ministry. And to thank you now for all that the Spirit is going to do through you.
And so we gather each week truly in the spirit of Jesus, in the spirit of love, in the spirit of justice, in the spirit of peace. We unite, which in and of itself is a thing. We unite to worship God who is love, and we gather so we can be sent. We gather so that we can be sent out to do God's love in the world, in service to humankind. Beloved, go out and create earth as it is in heaven. Amen.
Amen.